I grew up subconsciously knowing that money was hard to get. Everyone in my life did not have money. I didn't like spending money. I would potentially even feel guilty. And it's caused me quite a lot of stress. It was just such a burden.
Scarcity mindset is always kind of feeling like there's a lack, always worrying that there's not enough, kind of feeling like you really need to monitor your money, even if you don't.
It was always on my mind. I think that stripped a lot of joy out of my life.
It's checking in with that. It's really making sure, like, where am I getting that yucky feeling from, and what's that self-talk I've got around that? Like, why is that impacting me?
I can't think of a better way to describe it, but I just went, fuck it. I've spent so much of my life worrying about money.
Look, I get that, there's scarcity when there is scarcity of money, but I'm talking about people that don't need to be like that. I think it's about looking at what you truly value. If you don't have an understanding on what you value, then you're not properly looking at where you're putting your time, energy and resources.
Money does not equal happiness, but money can equal less stress. And there's a certain amount that if you can earn that amount, any more money that you earn does not actually make you happier. Welcome everybody to the Reconnect to Self podcast, the show that helps you ultimately rediscover what brings you joy. My name is Scott. I am a filmmaker and I am your host for today. And I'm here with my wife Tracey, who is a counsellor of some 20-something years. Hi babe.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm very well. I'm recovering from a cold, but I'm much better.
And we've got, I invested in some microphone stands, so our mics are right next to our mouth, and I hope this sounds as beautiful as it does on my headphones to those listening, because I think it's a big improvement. Guess what? We have a sponsor. First official sponsor.
Yay!
Yes. And it's actually people we know and love. It's Dee and the team from Ultratune Whitfords. Dee came on the Reconnect to Self retreat. I know she listens to the show and loves what we do, and so wanted to support us. They actually don't need any more business. They're doing this.
They're amazing as they are.
Yeah, so they're doing this purely because they believe in what we're doing, and honestly, I think that says a lot about who they are. They've been in the game for 25 years, family owned and run, and the way they do things is very much old school customer service, straight up, honest, no BS. And I think I've definitely had this. You've probably had it. We've all had that moment where you are speaking to a mechanic. They're telling you this, that, and the other, and you've got no idea what it means or how much it's going to cost. And at the end of the day, you just want someone you can trust. So if you're in Perth, need a mechanic, go and see Dee and the team at Ultratune Whitfords and tell them that Scott and Tracey sent you. I think I did pretty good.
Great.
All right.
Yeah.
And thank you, Dee. I know you're listening. Okay. We also have the 30-day challenge, and I'm pretty sure this podcast goes out the day before the challenge starts.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about what that is?
So this time of the year, I usually struggle with keeping up with my good habits. And partly that's because my beach walks go out the window and my breath works on the sand after the beach walks, also no longer happen. So I find it a little bit more tricky at this time of the year when it's colder and not as easy to get out of bed. So I thought if I created a 30-day challenge, where we can get everybody involved to just sort of post or commit to doing some act of self-care for yourself every day through the month of July. And that's going to give people a chance to, feel supported, to get that motivation for everybody else, and kind of just keep yourselves accountable. And that'll keep me accountable. So I thought that was a good idea.
Yeah, like you are not making that up. You came up with this idea because you felt like you weren't doing the things that you like to do.
Yeah, and when we come off the back of our retreats, we've often got a group chat going, and for the week or two after the retreats, people are posting what they're doing, and it does keep people more motivated just seeing what everyone else is doing. So I thought, well, let's keep that going on a bigger scale, so not just people that have come on the retreats, have that opportunity, but we can open it up for other people to, have that support and get those encouraging posts and messages and things.
Did we say it was totally free?
Oh yes, it's totally free. So no money needs to come from you. It's just about your time and your energy that we require.
So the way it's going to work is you hop on the website, traceyquayle.com/30 days. or you just go to tracyquell.com and there's a big, massive image there that you can click on. It takes you to this little page that tells you more about it. We've got some FAQs. There's also a little spot where you put your name and your email address. Now that comes direct to me, and then I will send you an email saying, hey, what's your mobile number? I'll add you to the WhatsApp group. And that's how easy it is. So it's essentially, if you know how to use WhatsApp, you'll be able to be involved in this challenge. Challenge is an interesting word because it's, you know what?
It's not a challenge.
It's not a challenge. You can do whatever you want.
It's just more of a commitment for that month of being able to, you know, look after yourself or do some different things that you wouldn't normally have tried.
Yeah. So Tracey and I will post every day. You guys can post as much or as little as you want. There's really no pressure to, you can be, what are they called? A lurker?
No, an observer.
You can observe and just, you know, read what other people are doing. Obviously, we would encourage you to get involved. Yeah, I feel like we've talked about that long enough. Yeah.
So sign up.
Yeah, join us. What are your views? I was thinking about this and we haven't had a chance to talk about it on people can join late, right? Doesn't have to be.
Yeah, it doesn't worry me. I want people to just do whatever, you know,
agree.
they can do.
So you've got all the way up until like the 29th of July if you want to join it for a day, but we start officially on the 1st of July. So I'm pretty sure that's going to be tomorrow. All right, let's get into the episode. So this was my idea, and you were happy to talk about it. So it's all about money and how money impacts us, I would say personally as an individual, but also, you know, obviously has an impact on relationships. This is by no means financial advice.
No, definitely not.
This is just, and we're not even really going to go into that at all. It's more about, because I've had issues with money, right? And we can probably start off talking about childhood. And you've had influences from how your childhood.
Everyone is influenced from childhood. We are influenced by what we see our parents do, what their habits are. They become what we see as kind of normal.
Yeah. Well, do you want to talk about Frank and Leah?
Yes. So my money story, my mum actually came from money. My mum.
Did she?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It?
No.
Yeah.
Where is it?
She learned to drive in a Mercedes. That was her.
Actually, I have heard that before.
Yeah,
but
she
I
went
forgot.
to a private school and, you know, lived in Glenelg in South Australia. So, you know, quite well to do.
Hasn't filtered its way down.
It did not filter its way down. Yeah. I think her dad died early, so her mum kind of burnt through the inheritance.
Which is actually fair enough. I'm only joking. Like, you know, people earn the money, you can do whatever you want with it.
That's right. But no, so in my childhood, because my parents divorced when I was 4, so, you know, I was in very separate houses with different ways of spending money. So my dad, we always used to joke that he was feast or famine. And so that meant that, you know, whenever he was paid, you know, our fridge and our cupboard was stocked, you know, of the good stuff. But we also knew that on payday, especially if Dad had done some overtime, that was the time to hit him up for new jeans, new shoes, new whatever. And Dad was quite generous, you know, with those things. So if you went late night shopping on a Thursday on payday, you could clean up, you know. But what that also lets me know nowadays is he would pretty much spend it all. Like there wouldn't be that savings, which is why it was so fun on the payday, but then it would probably get stretched pretty thin, you know, before the next payday. My mum was very much a bit more frugal. You know, she would only spend things on the money on things that she really valued. She's the kind of person that, you know, would go to a coffee with friends and bring her own banana. Rather than buying something at the cafe. She'd just have the coffee and bring her banana. So she's very much, you know, always looking out for ways to not spend as much, and she gets a lot of joy from paying her bills and paying things on time, you know. So for me growing up, I was sort of watching Dad, you know, with this spending kind of habits. And if something happened in our house, like say the washing machine broke, because we never had savings, Dad would go out and buy things on kind of like that hire purchase where you got 23 months to pay it off and things. But what that would mean is he's not really getting things on special. He's not looking around for the prices and things. So that's what I witnessed growing up. But my dad...
That was called lay-by, wasn't it? Remember lay-by?
I don't think it was lay-by. It was where they...
So hire purchase, I think, is when, I know I'm getting into the weeds here.
Yeah,
I
you
don't
take
need
it
to-
home.
You take it home straight away.
Yeah,
and chip
lay-by
away.
is when you're paying it off. So
Yeah,
that's
okay,
fine because it's still your own money.
They
But
don't
this
seem
was
to have
where...
lay-by anymore. Remember that used to be a thing?
Yeah.
Used to be in every like Target and...
They might still have it, I don't know.
Yeah, anyway, sorry.
But when I was growing up, like, so when I got into my teenage years and I started working at Chicken Treat and earning my own money, around that time, my dad went and worked away, and my brother, who's 7 years older than me, he was kind of my guardian for that time because I was living with my dad. And he always said to me, if you're going to go and buy something, so if I'd bought a stereo or eventually when I bought a car, he said to me, you have taken this long earning that money, like that many hours to earn all that money, at least spend a couple of hours researching the best price. So I really took that to heart as a teenager, and I would research the heck out of everything.
Yep.
And that was such good advice because I was obviously, you know, kind of coming from dad's mentality of just go out and get whatever you see. So my brother really influenced me a lot, and I'm very much like that still today.
Yes, grateful to Brendan.
Yes. What about for you?
So I grew up, the first 10 years of my life, I lived in the Isle of Man, which is a little island in between England and Ireland in the Irish Sea. And there's not a lot of people there, and there actually is a ton of money on there now because it's a tax haven. But back then, everyone in my life did not have money. Like, it was just my mum and my dad both grew up where you had to work really hard to get anything. And so it's not like I remember hearing specific stuff, but I know that I grew up subconsciously knowing that money was hard to get. Money was tight. My parents did an amazing job. I always got presents for my birthday and presents for Christmas. But takeout was never... I look at our kids now at how often they expect to eat takeout. It's at least weekly. Part of it was there was not a lot of takeout on the Isle of Man, but another part was money. We had fish and chips, and that might have been a couple of times a year. That was a huge treat, something I really look forward to. But I guess the point is I know, because I've done work on it now, that my childhood... just subconsciously, I was raised in that, I know you're going to talk about scarcity and abundance. I was raised in a kind of a scarcity mindset that money is hard to get. If you get it, hold on to it. Don't spend it on stupid stuff. Save it. Make sure you have some savings. And I carried that all the way through. Like, I think I woke up at about 3 a.m. last night and I started thinking, what am I going to talk about on this show? And even into my late teens, I'm talking when I was at uni, so 18, 19, I would go to the petrol station and put $5 of petrol in my car.
Can I tell everyone what else you used to do?
Yeah.
You used to
I know
put
what
it in neutral going down the hills to save on petrol, didn't you?
Yeah. It's one thing. I've had manuals my whole life, and now I finally have an automatic. It's one thing I don't like about the automatic is I guess you could slot it into neutral, but it's a lot easier in a manual just to pop it in neutral going down a hill. But that's just the mentality that I had around money, and it's caused me, quite a lot of stress in my life. Especially when we had kids, and we can get into that a little bit, but yeah. My mum worked Friday nights at the fish and chip shop just to earn a little bit more money. My dad...
And she wouldn't bring the fish and chips home? You only got them a few times a year?
Yeah. I do. Well, I have a vivid memory, right? You know how that movie Inside Out, and you have the core memories of the big marble drops in? One of my core memories is going to that fish and chip shop, and Mum was working, and we got fish and chips, and it was phenomenal. I was probably in bed when she got home. That probably would have been part of it. I was little. And my dad, he worked, so he was an electrician, but he worked on Saturdays and Sundays mowing lawns. Another core memory I have is going to some person's house with him and his brother, and I must have been with my cousin, and I thought it was amazing. Like, Dad was cutting the grass. I remember the lawn was huge, and they had apple trees and all sorts of stuff, and we were running around having a great time, and Dad and my uncle were mowing the lawn. But they just had to do what they had to do to get enough money to pay the bills. So that's sort of how I was raised. And then I think the issues that then created for me is I didn't like spending money in general. Didn't like spending money even if it was something that I was probably going to get some joy out of. I would potentially even feel guilty depending on how much I spent on that, or have buyer's remorse. Hated having no savings, so I always worked to make sure that I could save my money. But yeah, the biggest thing for me is, because, you know, when you're in your 20s, you know, I did buy an apartment, so I had a mortgage, but it wasn't, you know, we're of that age where we were lucky enough to get into the housing market before the massive boom, which I think was 2003, 2004, something like that. So I managed to get in the market before that. So my mortgage was manageable. I had a job, and I could go out and drink beer on the weekends, and I could go on holiday with my mates to Bali or Thailand or whatever once a year. When we got together, and more so when we had kids, and then we made the decision to build a house, and we had a lot of debt. And I remember looking at in the online banking at how much money we owed. And then went through a period where my job was stressful and didn't really love my job. And I just remember that the immense pressure that I felt on my shoulders around money, and how uncomfortable it was for me, and how stressed I was about it. Even though we had enough to pay our bills and we still got to take the kids to Bali and stuff, it still just really had that overwhelming grasp of not urgency, but just overwhelm, or I don't know what it was, but it was certainly unpleasant. And that's when and I think we've talked about this before. Back then, I never opened up to you. Like when I was struggling, I'd never, which people will think sounds crazy, when you have counselling on tap, but I just didn't sort of learned how to do that in kind of my late 30s, I would guess, but early 30s when we were together, I didn't share much with you. And yeah, it was just such a burden. That's probably the best word to describe it. And it was always on my mind. And I think that stripped a lot of joy out of my life, because I was always worried about money. And that's why I wanted to talk about it today, because I think it does have that.
It can really impact relationships in a negative way if it's not talked about, if it's not agreed upon in terms of what you both value, you know, your resources going on.
Yeah. Well, before we jump into that, because that is definitely a section we'll talk about, do you want to brief, because I mentioned scarcity and abundance mindsets. Do you want to tell people a little bit about what that is? So
a scarcity mindset is always kind of feeling like there's a lack, always worrying that there's not enough, you're not going to have enough, kind of feeling like you really need to monitor your money, even if you don't. So, look, I get that, you know, there's scarcity when there is scarcity of money, but I'm talking about people that don't need to be like that, but they still are penny pinching, they're still looking for, you know, the specials to the point where it's consuming. Like, it would be different if you just like a bargain. Like, I love a bargain. I love
a bargain too.
Yeah, so I like that feeling of, you know, not paying full price for something, or going to a restaurant on a day where there's a special. Like, that's nice that you're not paying that full whack. Or over here in Australia, we have these entertainment cards, and you can get a discount off the dining or off the outing and things.
Lovely experience.
Yeah, so we like things like that. But that's just a nice feeling. It's not we actually need to use those vouchers and things. We just like to not pay full price.
Yep.
But for some people, that could be very consuming. Where it's all about the money, and that's what they're solely focused on, despite that they don't actually really need to watch it that strongly.
One of my favourite comedians talks about this on his podcast, where he will research to the point of exhaustion, and even for low cost spends. Yeah, because he has a lot of mental health issues, which is, you know, quite common with comedians, and he hates it, but he can't stop himself. So I don't go to that extent, but you know, I sort of get it.
So then there's the abundant mindset, which I think I definitely have. where you just kind of think it'll all work out. Like you're going to have enough money for everything that you need. And look, that's not a pie in the sky. I'm going to go and do crazy decisions and buy whatever. That's just me kind of feeling like I'm always going to have enough to cover my needs and cover my wants. And, you know, I'm going to work towards that. But I always just feel like it's always going to work out. That's my mentality.
I think that's such a nicer place to live because I'm probably still not at the abundance mindset that you have, but I've definitely come along. If it's a spectrum and on one side is scarcity and the other side is abundance, I was very much on the scarcity side. And I think over the years, I have worked my way up more to the abundance side, probably still a lot closer to the middle than you. But it's such a nicer place to live. Like, how would I describe it?
It's probably a bit of less pressure in your head because you're not overthinking it all the time.
Yeah. And do you know what it was? And I can't think of a better way to describe it, but I just went, fuck it. Like I was like, I've spent so much of my life worrying about money. You know, because I've made in the last 10 years some pretty, what some people would consider crazy decisions, risky decisions in terms of my career and giving up a salary and, you know, sort of doing it again with this and trying to build this and not getting as much paid work as I used to. And a big part of me just now goes, fuck it. Like, I'm sick of worrying because we've always been okay.
Yeah.
I'm a reasonably smart person. You're a smart person. We can figure it out.
Yeah. And I think what you're saying is really important, that this can affect our moods.
Yeah.
We have a friend, and if they listen, they'll know who it is, where he used to check the stock market. And he would literally say to us, he's in a good mood because the stock market went up and it meant he technically made however much money that day. He didn't, because he didn't take it out of the share market. So it's just a visual thing on the screen. And then the next day or the week later, when it went down again, he had a bad day because of that. And I used to say to him, why are you letting that dictate your mood when it's numbers on a screen?
Yeah.
Like
numbers on a screen is something I kept having to say to myself over and over again. Like, because you're right. Your mood can be very, very low and you're stressed and anxious about money. And then the next day, for whatever reason, nothing's really changed, but you might be in a better mood. So how can you be in a better mood when the numbers on the screen haven't really changed that much? Like,
so it's checking in with that. It's really making sure, like, where am I getting that yucky feeling from? And what's that self-talk I've got around that? Like, why is that impacting me, you know, so much?
Yeah. Should we go in a little bit into relationships? So one of the first questions I had is, and I think we've been either lucky or we chose each other well, but having aligned goals.
You have to go into that checking that out.
Yep.
So I remember when we very first met, I said to somebody, I really like him. I think it was Nikki. I think I said to my friend Nikki, who we've talked about before, I said, I really like him, but I'm just not sure with the money thing.
Yep.
And she goes, why? And I said, well, I kind of pay for everything. I've been paying for, you know, a lot of stuff. And then she said, Tracey, if you do to him what you do with us girls, you won't let him pay for anything.
Yep.
And I stopped and I thought about it and I was like, oh, that's true. So again, part of my money story is because I came from, you know, a duplex and my friends all came from, you know, nice houses, and I always felt like a little bit like I was less than when it came to money. I was always wanting to make sure I paid my way and probably even more so would pay everyone else's way and be very generous and push people out the way of the checkout and the counter and things like that. Like I literally have thrown my friends' purses on the floor so they've got to go get it so I can tap my credit card. And so when my friend said that to me, I realised actually that is what I'm doing to you. Like I'm probably not going as crazy as throwing your wallet on the floor, but I'm sneaking up there to pay when you've gone to the toilet or I've gone to the toilet at a restaurant. You know, I'm just doing things in a way to not be awkward about money. So it meant that I would pay for money. So we went on a holiday within the first year of us being together, a big overseas trip. And I remember thinking, that's going to be my test for the relationship, was purely around money.
Yeah, you've told me this before.
Yeah, because everything else lined up, but I wasn't sure about the money situation. So it was actually seeing you be a bit more generous on the trip, or we were paying for certain things and you had it on your credit card, and when I went to pay you back when I got home, you said, no, just pay off your credit card first. Like, don't have that whacking up the interest. Like, don't worry about me just yet.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, well, I like that.
Yeah, I think it was the credit card thing. And I don't really have any memories of you paying for stuff, but knowing what I was like back then, I probably would have gone, oh, this is pretty good. So for me, it was a positive. For you, obviously a negative. But it was the credit card. It was, you've told me that before. It was when I said, don't worry about it.
Yeah, but I think you've got to check.
So you still actually technically owe me that.
But I think you've got to check those things out, early on, because I remember so right when you were moving in with me around that time, we'd come back from the holiday, I had this roommate and, he drove us crazy. But one of the things we noticed about him was he was terrible with money. He had a lawn mowing round that one of my friends actually offered to him and said, look, my mate's working on the mines. Do you want to take over his lawn mowing round and, you'll get the money from it? And they had this agreement of what they were going to do with the money from this lawn mowing round. But what this guy did is, instead of doing like the 4 or 5 lawns he's supposed to do in a day, they're on the rotation, those customers, he would go out and do like maybe 1, maybe 2 lawns that day, just enough to pay a bill that came in and get himself a dinner at the pub that night.
Yeah.
And I remember him meeting this lady, and when I would talk to him about this lady and what she was like, and she sounded like she had her head screwed on, she had a good job. And I just remember thinking, she will have no clue how bad he is with money.
Yeah.
Because what he will be saying to her is, I've got a lawn mowing round. It sounds like it's his own business. It's not, but he's running it into the ground.
He's renting a room in Tapping.
He's renting a room. He's not even got any sort of assets behind him.
Yep.
So I always remember thinking, she will be in for a rude shock when she sees his financial situation.
Yeah.
So I think in the very early stages, pay attention to that. Pay attention to someone's spending habits, because that's going to be an indication of maybe what's going on, in their financial world.
Yep. So did we ever have an official conversation about what our vision was or our money goals, and what do you recommend to couples?
I don't know that we ever really sat down and talked about goals. I remember that we probably just said, when you moved in, you'll pay maybe the bills and I would pay the mortgage still.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yep.
So we did talk about how we were going to divide money or pay money
But we agreed pretty early we were essentially sharing, especially when we had kids.
Yeah.
Definitely when
we had kids pretty quickly. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Still think that was crazy.
But I don't think we necessarily had goals like that. I'll give you an example of when people do have money goals from the very beginning. I had this lady once, this is early on when I started private practice, and I only ever saw her, not her husband, but when she told me that at the very beginning of their relationship, the husband had said to her, do you have any goals for the future? And she didn't really. And she said, what about you? And he said, I'm sure I've actually given this example perhaps on the podcast before, but it's worth a repeat. He said, I want to get out of debt. And all he meant was pay off a mortgage. Yep. He wanted to be debt free. So she thought, that sounds great. Who doesn't want to pay off their mortgage and be debt free? So when they first, made that agreement, they didn't have children. And then when they started to have children, the agreement was she was the stay-at-home mum. He was out of the house kind of from 7 a.m. till maybe 6 p.m. And very quickly, she realised how strongly this goal was important to, her husband, because they weren't able to get takeaways. That was back in the days of DVDs. They weren't allowed to go and get DVDs. So any extra spending, apart from it, being socked on the mortgage, just wasn't happening.
Yep.
And so her being a stay-at-home mum meant that she was never getting a break from cooking. If you're never getting a takeaway, you're never going out for dinner, you're never doing anything like that, then it's all on her. And that particular client, she actually got postnatal depression.
Yep.
And he wouldn't take time off work because he needed the money or he wanted the money. So it actually then led to resentment in the relationship, that because of the money being such a full-on goal, there was no balance. There was no support really in the relationship because he wasn't taking that time off. And they did pay off the mortgage, pretty quickly. They paid it off within probably, maybe 10 years. But then what happened is all that time that he missed out on because he was so desperate to work, when the kids were little, now all of a sudden the kids are teenagers and he's got this time because now he's decided that we've paid off the mortgage, now I can go part-time, with my work.
Yep.
They were only earning then half the money well, that was just kind of covering the bills and the other expenses. Now I don't need to pay the mortgage. It wasn't like they were flush with cash and now we're doing the holidays and now we're doing all the extra things. It just meant that now he got extra time. But she almost felt like that was wasted because the kids didn't even really want to hang out with the parents in their teenage years the same way that, you know, they would have when they were little kids in primary school. And that was all the stuff that he missed out on. So the mistake that they made was not checking back in together on whether that was working. So for him it was working, but for her it was not, and she was really resenting him. But they didn't stop, come back together and renegotiate that.
I imagine that's probably a huge one. And there's someone in my life, well, our life, I won't say who it is, but is so focused on money, and I sort of see this person making choices about, you know, in 10 more years, you know, we'll have tons of money and we can spend it on whatever we want. And I really think that there's, you know, essentially retirement, right? Like get to retirement and we're going to be flush with cash and we're going to be so well off and we're going to have generational wealth and all of this stuff. But part of me sort of thinks, yeah, but what are you going to do then? Your kids will be grown up.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that so many people get caught in that trap. And I'm not advising, you know, spend all your cash and be ridiculous about it. But there has to be this trade-off between, you know, this not imaginary goal in the future, it's a real goal, but this, whatever this imaginary finish line is, and living for now and being grateful for what you have now, and maybe investing a little bit into creating you talk about creating memories a lot, and that's you should talk about that, because that's something that really did resonate for me and actually helped me be more comfortable in spending a bit more money on holidays, for example.
Yeah. Well, I think it's about looking at what you truly value. If you don't have an understanding on what you value, then you're not properly looking at where you're putting your time, energy and resources in the most efficient way. And I think that not only do you need to look at that individually, but you need to look at that as the couple. Because what commonly plays out is whoever's managing the finances, and maybe that's because they're just the person that's more skilled up to do that or has more time to do that, but hopefully they're the more savvy in the relationship, you know, in terms of that. But they often then could be controlling the finances in such a way that it is meeting the goals that they find are most important. So an example of that could be if I've got a client that is really focused on retirement and is really focused on investments, they might put the budget as a certain amount and the other partner can feel very restricted within that budget, but it's because the extra money that they do actually have is going towards what the other person is prioritising, which is that security for the future. But if they're not really knowing that that's the case, that there actually is a bit more wiggle room, they might negotiate that differently.
Yeah.
So it's really important that you're getting clear on what are the things that we're both valuing and where are we putting this money?
Is it, because I was going to say, like, if you're listening and you're in this situation where maybe your money goals are not aligned with your partner, maybe you're a saver, they're a spender, or vice versa, or I think something else you mentioned is that feeling like you're being monitored.
Yes.
So basically that is whoever's in charge of the budget, because usually it's one person, right? In our relationship, it's me. If I wanted to, I don't bother, but if I wanted to, I could check all of your credit card spending and be going, well, what was that purchase?
Well, that's what happens. So I have clients that come to me and say, because the person that's managing the budget, or maybe they're not, but they just have access to the app, to the banking app, they could be checking that banking app 3 to 4 times a day, and this is where it's very preoccupied, but then following up with their partner saying, oh, I see that you went to blah, 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 or what did you get over in such and such? And look, for some people that can be a controlling behaviour where they're monitoring the spending, but even if they're not meaning it to be controlling, even if it's just their own hyper focus on money and now they're just aware of where you've been because they've seen the transactions go through on the credit card or whatever, and then them following up, but the other person can feel very, very monitored. And that's not a nice feeling. You know, we're adults. And regardless of whether you earn your own money, and what I mean by that is if there's one income earner in the family and your role is different and you're not going out for paid work, you've still got that right to that money because of the roles that you've chosen in the family.
Yep.
So to feel like someone's checking up on what you're spending is a really yucky feeling.
So what should people do in these situations where, like, it could be that, or it could be, they just have totally different, it's not that they're being monitored, but they just have totally different ideals or visions of, or goals around money, or behaviours on how they spend money.
So you might want to create some shared goals around money. So that could be around holidays or renovations or things that, do need to be saved for. And then you could also have an agreement around, well, how much money can we spend per week, per fortnight, per month, whatever it is, that's okay. That's not going to be questioned. I could waste it all on whatever it is, and that's my right to do that.
Yep.
So having an understanding of how much that is. Sometimes people can, share money in different ways. So, in a relationship, it might be that it's everything goes in the one account and, everything is shared. Some people could have a certain percentage go in a shared account and a certain percentage, stays behind that they can spend on, whatever it may be. Some people have agreements around how much can they spend without checking back in with each other, or, how much autonomy can I have to go and buy whatever it is without, need that to be an agreement we both make together.
Yep.
So it's making sure that all of those things are really aligned and you really understand, kind of what you can or can't do within the agreements of your relationship.
Yeah. So good communication. Sounds like they could go back and listen to that, one of our very early podcast episodes around
visions.
Visions.
Definitely do the visions one, because that gives you an understanding of, is the priority right now putting the pool in, or is it going on that holiday? Is it buying the car? Is it putting it towards the retirement for right now because it's nearly tax time and we can get some better tax benefits if we chuck more into super right now? Like, really talking through what the priorities are is so important.
That reminds me, you wanted to talk about the car.
Yeah. And okay, so in a personal example for us around having an agreement, so same with that couple that didn't check back in, on the paying off the mortgage. Scott and I, when we bought our car, our first 7-seater car, so we knew we were having Amelia and we knew we had to upgrade our car to fit more people in.
Amelia is the third child.
Is the third child, yep. So we bought a car and we made the agreement at the very beginning. I don't know who said it, one of us, but we said
it would have been you.
Let's not run this car into the ground and have it until it literally dies.
Because that's what we had done every single time. I had done my entire life.
Yes.
I hate buying cars. That was a thing for me. I just hate it. Like, it's at the beginning of the episode, I talked about spending money. There's, other than a house, I mean, what are you spending more money on than a car, right? Like, it's such a big purchase. I hate the pressure of it. I hate the research and, am I going to make the right decision and blah, blah, blah. So I just find it to be quite an unpleasant experience.
Yes. So we had made this agreement that, maybe we would change the car within 5, 6.
Probably, I think it was less, but yeah. We'd watched our other friends
all change cars.
All on top of it. And it's just one of those things that I just, like I said, I feel like I'm a reasonably smart guy, but with some of these things, I probably do make stupid choices out of whatever's holding me back. Mm-hmm. That fear or hatred of the big purchase process.
So we made this agreement, and then kind of around COVID was around the time that we should have been, looking at upgrading, and we're watching our friends do that, and we're knowing that there's really massive long wait lists for cars, around that time. So I was knowing that even if we were going to put the deposit down now for a car, it probably would be 12 months before it was going to, come through. Yeah. But as I started mentioning these things to you, you were dragging your feet and making comments that you weren't really that on board with it. And it was really confusing for me because we'd made that agreement, earlier on. And it wasn't that we couldn't afford it. It just meant that for you didn't like the look of the numbers on the screen.
Yeah, it was going back to that pressure of, oh my God, like, instead of working the debt off, we're adding to the debt. Yeah. That's what it was.
So
and we're both not really car people.
Look, we're not car people in the sense of we've got friends that will go out and spend a huge amount of money on a car, and that's because that's what they value, that's what they love, or they might change their cars over every few years, get the latest model of something or try something different. That's not what brings us joy. Yep. So it wasn't that I was needing a new car for the excitement of it or whatever. It was more about the fact of let's not hang on to something that eventually is going to start, needing replacing parts.
And lose its value. And
lose its value and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
So when you were starting to, really show reluctance around getting a new car, it caused some tension in our relationship because you were not honouring that agreement that we had. So we had to have a lot of conversations.
Because I thought that was going to be future me's problem. I was like, I'll just agree now.
So another tip, do not do that.
I don't have to deal with this for 5 years. Future Scott can sort that out.
And future Scott did not sort that out. So we had to have lots of these conversations and get to the bottom of, Scott's worries and anxieties around money and things. And in the end, we never upgraded the car. We still have that car.
Yeah. There's no.
So what's the plan for that, Scott?
Well,
you told me this is our time to have big conversations, is our podcast. So we're going to open that back up.
I genuinely still feel the same. I look at that car and go, yeah, it still does a job. And also, do we really want to get into this?
No, not really. But I'm just joking.
But your thing about the 7-seater, I don't think we need a 7-seater anymore.
Yeah. But the point is, I had to have that conversation with Scott. We had to come back on the same page, of me now, I guess, compromising.
Coming back on the same page.
Stop it. I'm not making that mistake today. So we had to, renegotiate to the well, not that we have really renegotiated, but I've come back to an understanding of you're not ready to do that just yet. So it's still a conversation for the future.
And I am very grateful for that because it still makes me uncomfortable. Like and especially with the transition that we're sort of going through at the moment with work and money that we're bringing into that, or specifically that I'm bringing into the household. The thought of, because, we would want to upgrade the car. Mm. So, I definitely appreciate that you've cut me a break on that one.
Yeah. So you need to, if there is that kind of tension between, what one person wants and what the other person is not on board with, you really need to find that middle ground. And whether that's around timings in terms of, can we wait a bit longer, or whether there's some sort of compromise around the amount of money spent, but is there some way that you can come to some agreement and come back on the same page? So if I was going back to that couple that were paying off their mortgage really quickly and it was leading to resentment because whether she did try and approach him and nothing changed, or whether she never approached him, but if they were seeing me, I would have tried to find some sort of middle ground to go, what are the things that are impacting your current life? So obviously the no takeaways and the no extra activities that were taking money, they needed to be addressed. And so maybe it was kind of going, can we just, pause that paying off the mortgages quickly, even if it's for a year or two, that way it's going to add some more lifestyle into life now.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to something that I definitely want to talk about is, and look, there's no judgment on what you value is better or worse than what I value. But I felt like we could start with that story about the handbag because I think that leads into the topic that I want to talk about.
Okay. So I'll tell a story. So I was talking with one of my friends the other day about money and about, the different things we value. And one of the things that we were saying is that neither of us value designer items, like, designer handbags, shoes, even clothing. We're not really that fussed on. I'm talking like the proper designer, thousands of dollars kind of designer, not just like, the sports brand with a logo on it. And she told me a story that her kids go to a very expensive private school, and so there's a lot of money in that school. And she was out this one day with this lady who is very, very wealthy, and she noticed that she put her handbag on the table, and she could tell by the way that she presented the handbag that it was a very expensive designer. She didn't know the design or the name of it, but she could just tell by the body language that this was an expensive handbag. Yep. And then she watched the lady notice that the handbag was facing her.
The logo.
And therefore the logo was facing her. And so my friend watched her just ever so subtly turn the handbag around to face the rest of the table so that everybody could see that label. And that just...
that's the part of the story
that makes you go... If she loved that handbag, if she loved the brand, if she loved the feeling it gave her when she, held it and took it around, I have no problem with someone spending whatever it costs for that handbag.
Yeah.
My particular, it's not an issue, but my comment will be around that looks like you're doing that for other reasons.
Yeah.
That looks like you're wanting that acknowledgement from the outside of, oh, wow, look at her bag, look at that expensive da-da-da.
Yeah.
And I just think we've got to check out why are we doing things.
Yeah.
If we are buying something, to keep up with somebody or to fit in or to show that, we're doing well, that's not really the right reasons.
Agree. I totally agree with everything that you said. I feel the same way about that story. And because it's, who are we to pass judgment? But the part of that is that it's not about bringing herself joy. It's about what other people view of me. And I think from a mental health point of view, because, I can almost tie it back to fear of failure for me, right? Because, I've never had a ton of money to splash out on big showy things, right? But the reason I want to tie it back to fear of failure is when I went out and started my own business, I had a massive fear of failure because I was worried about what other people were going to say if I did fail. So the commonality there is what other people think of me, which is the thing with the handbag, is she's assuming that other people are going to be thinking, oh my God, what an amazing handbag, and so luxurious, and she must be doing so well. And that's the part that's the one little lesson I want to, like I said, I don't want to judge, but there's a lesson in there about stop caring what other people think.
Yeah.
If you're spending money based on appearances and trying to look a certain way and have people view you in a certain way, I would question that.
Yeah.
And if you can let it go, which is what I eventually did with the fear of failure, I eventually realized, do you know what? If my business fails, I'm pretty sure the people who care about me, and therefore are usually the people that I care about, are going to be quite supportive.
Yeah.
And not going to really judge me for failing. They'll probably try and lift me up and help me do the next thing. So I just think, by all means, spend the money on what you value, but as long as it's what's bringing you joy and you're not doing it for other people.
I think people also need to, while we were saying, live for the now and have that balance and things, I also think people need to do that vision to really see those longer term goals. And the reason for that is I remember very early in my career in private practice, I saw someone that was, I think she was 19 or 20. She was really young. And very quickly into our session, she said to me that she was $40,000 in debt. And now she's 19 or 20. And I was like, how are you $40,000 in debt? And she said she had gotten breast implants and she got a brand new car.
Yeah.
And again, I remember thinking, you're starting your life with this debt hanging over you. And now we all know that as soon as back in the day it was like this, as soon as you drive that car out the car yard, that brand new car immediately loses however much in value. And so what she was sitting on now is $40,000 worth of debt that she's got to pay off. And the excitement of getting those items, that's done.
Except
and she's now got to pay all that back.
But the surgery could give her such a huge boost of self-esteem. And if that's the case, then
that would
absolutely.
be, yes. But it's more around she's still doing that on credit.
Yeah.
For both of those items. Yeah. So people nowadays...
But we said we're not going to give financial advice.
No. But I'm just like, if you're not thinking about later on as well, to kind of go, what would I want that to look like when I'm ready to buy a house or ready to do, the next things?
Yes.
You've got to make sure that those choices you're making now are also supportive of the things you want to do for later on.
Yeah.
So I think being $19,000 and $40,000 in debt
absolutely.
is not a great way to start.
No. Yeah, I didn't own a brand new car until just recently. I'd never, ever, ever invested in a brand new car.
Well, I still haven't owned a brand new car.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't realise that. Okay.
We might revisit that car conversation.
Maybe the show will take off one day.
Share it with your friends, everyone. Share it. Tracey needs a new car.
There's a couple of other things I want to touch on before we wrap up. One of them is, and I'll just throw the figure out there. There has been probably many studies done, and this is not any particular study, it's just a number that I've seen a bunch of times, that money does not equal happiness, and there's a certain amount of money, but money can equal less stress. But then there's a certain amount that if you can earn that amount, any more money that you earn does not actually make you happier. And that number that gets thrown around is 70 grand. Now, I don't know if that's 70 grand Aussie or 70 grand US. But basically the point is, if you've got enough money to pay your bills, buy some food, maybe go on 1 or 2 holidays, live in a place that you're reasonably happy with, any extra money that you are earning, and because generally, people have to sacrifice something to earn that extra money, whether it's time, whether it's your mental health, or your physical health, whatever it happens to be. Don't get caught in that trap that I got caught in for quite a long time, that more money will make me happier.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't.
And you know what? People always say, if only I win lotto. And we actually know someone that won lotto. And look, while we think it was a big amount of money, so the person that we know won $1.6 million, and that's pretty big. Nowadays, that's a good chunk of money, but my friend said it was life enhancing, not life changing. But the funny thing when you actually witness someone win lotto is you actually now start to see different sides of that win that you wouldn't have really thought about. So I remember when she was telling me that she was going to give her family, money. And then we started thinking, gosh, what would we give our family or friends, or how would we divide that if we were in that same position? And you start realizing people have a lot of opinions.
Yeah.
And people have a lot of expectations. And so even just the thought of, wow, what if her family just assumed that every time we go out you should pay because you won lotto?
Yeah. Yeah, which happened.
Yeah. And even though they were very generous with their family and with their friends and things like that, I think there was a lot of expectation with his side of the family.
I think that their life was made significantly more complicated.
Yes.
By winning lotto.
And also when people do say about, life will be better when I have this much money or when I win lotto, what they've also found is people's habits don't change. And I always bang on about our habits being the same. And so they've actually done studies that of a certain amount of lotto winners that they've tracked, lots of them return to their old financial status after a certain number of years. And that's because their habits of spending didn't change. Their feelings around money haven't changed. So even watching my friend, it was funny that as much as you might be like, wow, you could do this now, you could do that now that you've got this extra money, she would still shop at the same shops and still want to get the bargain and still want to, kind of continue on as she was, even though she's got this.
Which is totally fine, and I would do the same thing. It was more watching external factors and how that impacted.
What my point is when people are saying life is going to be better and life is going to be...
They generally don't.
They don't. And also I have loads of clients that are very wealthy. They still have the same problems.
Yeah.
Relationships are relationships. Like, yes, you can pay your bills. Yes, you can go on a nice holiday, so it takes the pressure off with certain things, but it still has all the other things in your life that are going to impact you. Yeah. Like, it just might make a few things easier.
Absolutely. Something else I wanted to talk about was gratefulness. And I tell you this quite often, so it's not news to you, but I love the fact that we've been in this house for quite a long time, and it's a nice house, but at the end of the day, it's still just a single-story 4x2 project home. But this house brings me so much joy, and I'm so grateful. I don't need a bigger house. Like, if we won lotto, I think we probably would eventually move. It depends how much money we won. But I'm so grateful for where we live that I feel like that has really helped me with money. I'm not in this rat race or whatever the term is. Like,
what's next?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And actually, someone told me that once. They said often when people hit a certain income bracket, they'll move closer to the city, they'll upgrade their house, they're starting to move into more of the affluent areas, so their mortgages are then high again, and then again they've got that money pressure. So even though they're in a more abundant situation, they're back to paying a huge mortgage. So it feels like they're back in that scarcity with money.
Because I think it comes back to the keeping up with the Joneses thing and the logos on the handbag, right? Like, I think the Barefoot Investor calls it postcode povos, which sounds horrendous, but essentially his theory is people really, really stretch themselves to live in a particular postcode, but because they've stretched themselves so much, they don't actually have any money because it's all going on this house. Yeah. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is I don't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. I like my life. I like where we live, and it genuinely still brings me joy. And I think maybe part of that is because it's the nicest house I've ever lived in my whole life. Like, you know, where I lived as a kid was fine, you know, wasn't terrible, but this house is nicer. And so I just have just such gratefulness when I look around the backyard or I'm having a swim in the pool. Like I sometimes look, especially when it's the colder months and we're lighting the fire outside, and I think if this was the 60s and this house was in Beverly Hills, it would be considered like one of those cool 70s single-story Hollywood, not mansions, but, you know, Hollywood homes. Yeah. And that mentality just makes me feel lovely.
And that just shows you, we've talked before about the way that you think creates the chemistry.
Yeah.
So you going into that, you know, with the gratitude and really looking at it with that comparison and sort of thinking of what you grew up in and what this is like now. Yep. And I must admit, I love that for the kids as well, that, you know, the shame I had around living in my half a house, my duplex, my kids don't feel that.
Yeah.
Yep.
But someone could equally walk around this house with a very critical eye.
Oh, definitely.
You know, there's a ton that could be better.
Yes. But
it's more about the mindset. So I guess my point on that is choose gratefulness. Like this is coming from someone who always wanted more money and always stressed about money. And, you know, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I found that gratefulness can be such a helpful tool to have in your toolbox when you're focused on too much on money, or what am I getting next, or what's the next thing, what's that person over there got.
And look at what you're prioritizing, because for some people, I'll give you an example. I've got a couple where they were telling me they rent a house, but they had the opportunity to buy their dream cars, you know, come up in the last few years. And you know, while they're quite expensive, these dream cars, the amount of joy that it brings, you know, both of them to have these cars. They've had comments from friends and, you know, opinions and things about people saying, oh, but you don't have a house, or, you know, you're still renting. But for them, they've figured out what they value. They've got a plan around what they want to do around housing. So it's just making sure that whatever choices you're making make you feel good, and it doesn't have to be what someone else values.
That's a lovely segue into one of the last things I wanted to talk about, which is investing in yourself or in your self-care. So obviously we've got this challenge coming up. I don't think you've actually told me this, but I get the impression that, you know, some clients might feel guilty on spending money on themselves.
They do feel guilty about spending money on themselves. And that could be, you know, on self-care. It could even be on therapy. It could be, you know, on wellness, like going to the doctors or going to another specialist and things, so they can feel bad about taking that family resource and just spending it, you know, on their wellness. Yeah.
And I'm having something similar because for long-time listeners of the show, they would know you've been on a few trips this year, some work. And
let's call them trainings. Tracey's been on some trainings this year, and one small trip to Singapore.
Yeah. And you suggested to me, it wasn't me coming up with this idea, why don't I get an Airbnb and just chill out for a couple of days by myself? Because that's kind of been...
Well, I gave you 3 options. I said with a friend, with me, or on your own. And he chose on his own. My trips were not on my own. My trips were with other people, but that's fine.
Because I think as long as I've been a parent, it's kind of been a little fantasy.
No, I'm joking.
I know. I know you do, yeah. But it's been a fantasy of mine to actually just have a couple of days by myself. And I still do feel guilty about spending money on this Airbnb.
Yeah. So I pointed that out to you because you had commented on the price. And then when we were talking about doing this episode and one of the topics being that people feel guilty about self-care, I said, well, that's you.
Yeah.
You're the
I
one
didn't
commenting.
actually hadn't made the connection because I wanted a tiny house in a beautiful location. $600 a night.
So if anyone would like to invest in land in a tiny house, that would
Oh
be
my
a
God.
good investment.
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I thought $200 a night for a tiny house.
I think they're quite sought after at the moment, so it's quite a premium.
Yeah. So I think I'm going to make a compromise and get a very rustic cottage, which
You'll
is
be in a caravan. You wait, next episode will be Scott went to a caravan park.
I found one. I think it works out to be about $250, $300, no, less than $300 a night.
So now I'm glad I'm not going.
But I think I will invest in myself and the self-care because I feel like I could do with a little break. I think that would be
But
nice.
it benefits everybody when we look after ourselves and we come back with fresh energy and we feel, recharged and replenished. We've got more to share with everybody else. If we keep just running ourselves ragged with everyone else's needs and not having those breaks and stops, it's not helpful for anyone.
Agree. Okay. I feel like we've sort of come to a natural conclusion. Is there anything else you want to share?
Well, maybe just for people to think about what money tips do you want to pass on to your kids?
Oh, yes.
What things would you like to make sure that they are, really aware of or are going to do with their financial future?
You want to share a little? We've got time. You want to share a little bit about what?
One of the things that I probably have definitely passed down to our kids based on my childhood is from what my brother had said about research, So when we go to the shops, my kids went through a stage where they were into the wrestling.
Yep.
And so they used to buy the wrestling figures. And for anyone that follows wrestling, you have to go to the shops to look at what the figures they have. They are not ever the accurate ones online. So you have to go into the store and see physically what products they have. And so what we'd learned is you might go into one of the department stores and see one of the wrestlers that they want, and we would buy that, with their pocket money or whatever reason they're getting the toy. And then we'd go into another one and they'd see a different one that they actually liked better, and they would try and beg for the next one. So I showed them that before we buy anything, let's check all of the options at all the different department stores, make sure the prices are either the same or there's one on special. You can, choose that one.
Yep.
But it's really researching to get the best for their money. And I think that's a really good tip because otherwise they're going to move forward doing oh no, I've got the wrong one. I'll just buy the second one or I'll buy the third one.
Yeah.
Whenever we go to the shops and they ask for treats, I'll always say to them, is it on special? So they know.
Yeah, that's been drilled into them.
Yeah. Well, that's because I'm trying to show them that you can have a treat and that's full price this week and next week it's half price.
Yeah.
So why get it on full price? Wait until you're getting the half price and then next week you can get the other thing.
Tommy do something recently where it was maybe a bigger
toy mate. Yeah.
bigger purchase.
So that must have drilled in because he told me that he wanted to buy, what was he buying? Can't even remember what it was now. But he'd seen it. Oh, it was Lego. It was a Formula One Lego.
He's into F1 now.
Yeah, he's into Formula One. So he wanted to get this Lego and he went to a particular store, but he'd seen it online at a different store cheaper. So we actually asked them if they would price match. Now, I was blown away.
Yeah, me too, because, for a teenager to actually speak up and...
Yeah, and even to know to do that
Yeah.
or to, to check the other prices and things. But yeah, that was amazing that he's taken that in and, learnt that. So I think that's a really simple one that you're still getting what you want, but you're just getting it for a better price.
Yep, agree. So yeah, have those conversations with your kids.
And have them with your partner. So get really clear on what are the things that we're actually working towards in the relationship. Do we have agreements around how much we can spend, each week or each fortnight? How much can we spend without checking in with each other? Because this can cause a lot of conflict in relationships. If you've got one person, with a passion project and they're wanting to rebuild an old car and every bit of spare money is going into parts, and the other person feels like, well, what about me? That can lead to resentment.
Absolutely. Okay. So it's just literally about talking about it.
Yeah, having those conversations. But I think really getting an understanding of how you want your life to be, around those visions could be really important. And if you set financial goals, try and do something to celebrate them. So for example, if you're saving for a holiday, maybe it's a big, massive overseas one where it might be 40 grand, every time you hit a certain milestone on that savings, go out for dinner.
Yeah.
Or go and do something to acknowledge that. Don't just be like it's a big slog, trying to work towards that. Break it down. Have those little milestones that make it more enjoyable along the way.
Yeah. And I don't usually give tips at the end of the episode, but I have one, and that would be if you are like me and struggled with that scarcity mindset, do the work. Like listening to this episode is step one. Go and read a book about it, or listen to other podcasts about it, or the audio book. That's what I did.
Yeah.
Like I devoted, I don't know how many hours, but it was a lot.
Yeah.
I knew I had an issue with money, and the only way I could get past that, and I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I'm a lot better than I was.
So what's this book?
Any book. Like look up
so
a
you
book
might need to read
about.
another couple of books to get the car across the line.
I just said I wasn't perfect.
Scott's birthday's coming up. You know what he's getting. It could be a car, it could be a book. But my other tip would be make sure you have these conversations with your partner, because not that we've covered it today, but I've often had people come in with horrendous stories around credit card debt, or people thinking that certain things are paid and they haven't been paid, and that could be because someone's overwhelmed with managing and balancing the finances. It could be through other things to do with addictions, but if you've got one person in the relationship solely handling the finances, make sure that you're both across it.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't even get into like gambling. I bet you sports betting is a big one.
Yes, but even shopping,
shopping,
people having addictions to shopping, that dopamine hit, and so they can rack up these credit cards. I've heard horrendous stories where someone could have 2 or 3 credit cards of up to $70,000 that they're trying to manage secretly away from their partner. So that's a big deal in a relationship. So make sure that you are across kind of what's happening financially in your world.
Yeah.
And don't just leave it on one person's plate, like as much as...
Do you do that?
I check in with you all the time about our finances.
You do, actually. You just never log in. But
Yes.
you do ask me. You just take my word for it.
Yeah, so luckily I trust you, but he could have credit card debts up the wazoo. Who knows?
Yeah. All right. Shall we wrap up?
Sure.
Okay. Good job.
You too.
Before we go, just another quick reminder. Obviously, we talked about at the beginning of the show, but the 30-day self-care challenge starts tomorrow. So jump on the website, traceyquayle.com, and register and join us in the WhatsApp group if you're feeling a little bit flat or overwhelmed, or the weather's getting to you. It's a very easy and free way to do something about it.
Yeah, stay on track.
Yeah. Speaking of the website, if you want to join the mailing list, which is where we share additional tips, that's once a fortnight. You can do that at the website too, traceyquayle.com. You can follow Tracey on social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. That's at traceyquayle.therapy. And I've started doing some, I might actually start my own. I was thinking about this, starting my own social media account with the therapist's husband.
I love that idea. Then you'll leave me alone for the social media.
So if anyone hasn't seen, I've been trying to be funny and created this character who's based on me being the therapist's husband, and I give advice to my friends who are struggling and are not married to a counsellor. And it's, in my opinion, it's pretty funny.
It is funny. I agree.
So right now there's a couple of those on Tracey's social media, but I might actually start a separate account because it becomes a bit confusing when, what is this account? Are they giving tips or are they trying to be funny? And finally, the retreats. So there is a wait list for the relationship retreat that goes on sale mid-July. So
we sold out last time. So we
it's becoming very popular.
Create a wait list, yes.
So you can join the wait list and you get advance notice. I think at least 48 hours. Might be 3 days notice before those spots become available to the general public, so you don't miss out. And then we also have, so that next retreat is
In August?
August.
Oh, no, September. September, sorry.
Yeah, September. And
September.
then an individual
Individual one's
retreat
in August.
is in August.
Yes.
There is not a wait list for that, but I have a feeling it's going to sell out again.
Yeah.
So if you are interested in joining Tracey and myself in the beautiful Moon Dine Estate in Chittering, jump on the website and get in touch with us, and you can be one of the few people, because the spots are limited, you can't fit everyone in that place, for the Reconnect Self Retreat. Okay, I think I covered off everything.
Perfect.
Good job. I'll see you later.
Bye.
All right, bye-bye.